Hey everyone, this is Manly Badass Hero, and welcome to Mycorrhiza, an indie horror visual novel that's currently in development that pays tribute to horror manga. So, think Junji Ito, think basically the entire gamut. As Junji Ito is one of the most famous ones, but there's also some other very famous ones from other authors who may not have as an established name, but you've probably seen their manga panels. And I believe this is the first episode, so basically the first store is currently available. Oh great, I'm going to the cat door. Act 1. Pets. My eyes were burning. It felt like hot coals were lying on my eyelids. I slowly opened them, attempted to heave myself up from the cold asphalt, but I failed. My whole body was heavy, and my head felt like it was being squashed by a hydraulic press. After a few attempts, I finally succeeded and tried to make out where I was. The fog in my mind lifted slowly, and I realized I was in a dark alleyway. My vision was still blurry, and I had trouble keeping my eyes open, but I could tell that I had never seen this place before. Slowly, my heart began to race. Was I abducted? Mugged? What had happened to me? I hastily checked my body, fortunately finding no wounds. Why was I feeling this weak then? Maybe I was drugged. As I tried to recall what might have happened to me, my eyes finally focused, and I could see the house in front of me. In fact, it was the only house on the street with its lights on. The dirty yellow glow shone through every single visible window. I felt some relief knowing that the tenants were awake. Perhaps they could tell me where I was. I wouldn't mind some warmth either. I approached the front door. It took me some searching to find the doorbell through the overgrown ivy. Gong. A deep gong rang out from within the house when I pressed it. The sound, amplified by the cold wind cutting through my shirt, made me tense up. I should make that my doorbell. Like a custom recording on there. Just gong. What an odd choice for a doorbell sound, I thought while ripping my upper arms to warm myself. I waited. No one answered. My mind twisted in confusion. Why was no one coming? I rang the doorbell again. Then I tried knocking. No response. No one was coming. I didn't understand. Did they forget to turn off the lights and go on a vacation or something? No, usually you sometimes leave them on, make it seem like you're home. But then sometimes we get a little wiser, like, hey, wait a minute, those lights have been on the whole time. As a last resort, I tried turning the doorknob and it actually opened. This worried me. Did something happen to the family living here? Perhaps I should find a phone and call the police. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the street. My heart started to pound as my body tensed up. I wanted to dash into the house, but my feet refused to move. What was that sound? Was someone out here? Pictures of otherworldly monsters and armed kidnappers popped into my mind as my eyes scanned the darkness. The world was silent once more. I was still on edge, but my body slowly started to relax as I regained my composure. I decided I didn't want to find out what that was. Cautiously, I stepped through the threshold and firmly closed the door behind me. I felt an immediate lurch of guilt, since I was trespassing into a stranger's home, but I'd rather face a police questioning than wander around a strange neighborhood in the middle of the night. Hello, is anyone there? No answer. The house was eerily quiet. I cautiously ventured further down the front hall. Perhaps I could find a telephone. I stopped in front of one of the doors. A dim, yellow light seeped silently through the bottom crack. I turned the knob. Locked. Then the next one. Also locked. They all seemed to be. I frowned. Why were the lights behind these locked doors lit? It gave me an uneasy feeling. The door at the very end of the hall was the only one that I hadn't tried yet. I grasped its handle and turned it slowly. It swung open to complete darkness. Once again, my body tensed up while my mind started to conjure horrific images. A beast with dislocated limbs and crooked teeth creeping towards me from the darkness. A floor littered with corpses and walls stained with blood. A giant spider sitting in a corner, waiting for its chance to strike. A series of anime posters and figurines in a corner. My hand shook as I reached to flick on the light. Oh, thank God there's no anime. It was an utterly ordinary bedroom. Check under the bed. My heartbeat slowly calmed down as I realized that I seemed to be safe. I felt almost silly getting scared of nothing. A quick search yielded nothing but barren, dusty shelves, manly soul. The bed was the only meaningful object present. Slowly but surely, a wave of fatigue washed over me. The more I looked at the bed, the more tempting it became. Don't do some like Goldilocks thing here. Like, oh, the bed feels so comfy. I'm breaking and entering. With my adrenaline rush fading away, I found that I was more exhausted than I had realized. Like a worm worming its way into an apple, a single thought slowly appeared in my mind. How do you know worms have a single thought? That worm can be thinking of different things. Like his future. In college, I had to sleep. That was soon the only thing I could think of as my consciousness faded. I had to sleep. The world turned darker, and the soft covers of the bed pulled me deeper and deeper into the black abyss. Some people have gotten as little as a couple of hours of sleep the last couple of nights. Thank you for informing me that. Let's hope that this will all be over soon. I don't even know where this story's going. Very vague right now. I shot awake. It was as if no time had passed. I hardly remembered falling asleep. Feeling a bit better, I decided to take another look around the house. The fact that no one was here, even though the lights were on, was still nagging at the back of my mind. But I was more confident that I'd be able to find help now that it was daytime. I left the bedroom to try the doors, just in case. They were still locked. I would have at least liked to take a shower. I smelled my clothes, and they had indeed started to smell slightly sour. Is that a rhyme? It would have been nice to access the kitchen as well, although it was doubtful there was much food here given the house's empty state. Yeah, we're just taking advantage of this. This place seemed to have nothing left to offer. I'd be better off out in the streets now that it was day, even if I was still missing my wallet. I left the house for the bright sunlight. The back street didn't seem so bad anymore. I found it to be rather cozy and quaint. I made my way down the path until I heard the faint sound of conversation in the distance. A weight lifted from my heart when I first glimpsed people walking around in a pedestrian area. There weren't too many of them, though, and as I looked around, I got the feeling that it was a rather small town. Trees and flowers were planted at regular intervals, which gave it more of a rural atmosphere. It didn't matter. I could finally ask for help. "Excuse me, could you tell me where I am?" The woman blinked at my approach. She frowned and scowled in my general direction. Must be New York. It's an interesting town name. This is Keja... Is it Kejam? Hif? Kejam Hif, maybe. I'm assuming we pronounce the J, but I'm not sure. She looked uncomfortable talking to me, so I thanked her and let her be. Kejam Hif. I'd never heard of a town like that before. Where? How did I end up here? I'm pretty sure it's not a real town name, right? It's like it's some fictional one. So under that pretense, is it the name rearranged? Like all the letters? You can reform them into something else? The thought of being somewhere I didn't recognize scared me. How was I supposed to get back home if I didn't have the slightest idea where to go? I took a deep breath to calm myself down. My next best bet would be asking someone to allow me to make a call from their mobile phone. I approached an older man in a business suit. "Excuse me, may I use your phone? I'm a bit lost, and I would like to call a friend of mine so he can pick me up." His lips curled into a grimacing frown. Yeah, it's New York. Sorry, I'm in a bit of a hurry." I approached person after person, but even after what felt like several hours, I had no luck. No one wanted to lend an unkempt half-dressed stranger their phone. As I made my way through a side street, I heard two elderly women whispering to each other. I heard of some violent incidents recently. Most got away with just a flesh wound, saying that they were attacked by someone or something. Yes, I heard that too. I wonder if it has anything to do with the pet disappearances. I heard of another cat that didn't come back in several days. I was so focused on the conversation that I almost ran into a girl. Anime. I mumbled an apology until I realized that she had approached me on purpose. Hi. Hi. You need to call someone, right? She extended her hand and offered me her phone. How did you know? People have been talking about you. We've had some violent crimes here recently. Everyone is a little on edge. Many pets have been getting sick. Some say someone has been poisoning them. She nervously shuffled her feet and glanced away. Thank you. I won't take long. Don't want to get your anime on me. I took the phone and dialed a friend's number. But the call didn't go through. I tried it again, but the result was the same. Maybe his phone was turned off. I tried my parents' house phone, then my job's front desk, then my boss's personal cell. Each time the call failed. I was sure that I had the right numbers, but maybe the phone had a bad connection. It seems like the calls won't connect for some reason. Oh, sorry, I have AT&T. Maybe you'll have more luck trying a landline. My phone does act up sometimes. You might be right. Still, thank you a lot. I didn't want to hold her up any longer, so I gave her phone back and a piece of toast and wandered off with a rushed farewell. Leaving that way may have been a bit rude, but I was too frustrated to care. I just wanted to look for another way to get in contact with someone I knew. It occurred to me that I should have asked her for directions to the police station. I turned to look for her, but she had already vanished. As I made my way through town, I could now definitely feel the tension in the air. That girl was right. Everyone was on edge. While I was passing by an alleyway, something caught my eye. They were too big to be rats, and I couldn't really make anything out than their eerie glowing eyes. Maybe it was a cat gang searching in the trash for food, or maybe it's a Cthulhu. Apropos food, I was starving. But I couldn't possibly just ask random people to feed me, and since my wallet was missing, I didn't have any money on me to buy something. Though there were oddly tempting looking plants growing nearby. No! No! As I stared at them, I felt a pull. Their strange appearance hypnotized me, and without me noticing, my feet inched closer, and closer, and closer. Gonna save the game. Gonna save right there. Eat them! I couldn't really think while hungry, and who knew how long it's been since I've eaten, so it was probably either this or starving. I dug in. They didn't even taste that bad. Kind of grassy, but edible. Although it grew harder and harder to chew with every bite. Something red dripped into the ground. I soon realized that a liquid was coming out of my mouth. I couldn't tell if it was blood or the plant's juices. More started to pour out as I panicked and tried to figure out what was going on. While feeling around my mouth, I realized that I had become totally numb. Suddenly, a fleshy chunk fell into the red pool that had started to form before my feet. Was that my tongue? My vision became blurry, and my stiff body hit the cold ground. It was dark when I woke up again. I could make out that I was still lying next to the plants. It seemed like no one had bothered to help me. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. My whole body was paralyzed. I felt a sudden sting traveling from my head to my feet, and the pain grew by the second. Something was happening to me. My hand. It was bending in weird ways. Not just my hand. My whole body. It was warping. But it seemed like it couldn't handle the transformation. My body writhed and snapped in two. Don't eat the weird root thing. Choose sensible decisions. Protag, who's not totally being controlled by Manly, who wants to make you choose bad decisions because he thinks it's funny. I broke away from the hypnotic pull of the plants. What was I thinking? It didn't matter how hungry I was. They may be poisonous. But my hunger was beginning to gnaw at my insides. My vision grew blurry. Who knew how long it's been since I've been eaten? Suddenly I collapsed, and the world around me vanished. I heard that another team had some problems with a scientist of theirs who ended up being banned from the research center. She apparently performed experiments on humans who were... I could almost sympathize with her. It was dark when I awoke. It seemed like no one had bothered to help me. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. My whole body was paralyzed from hunger. Something was shuffling by my ear. Shuffle, shuffle. I felt the sniffing of an animal. Perhaps one of those cute cats I saw earlier. I couldn't bring myself to look. It lost interest and walked past me towards the plants. I heard more follow. As they padded into view, I noticed that something was off about them. It must have been my mind playing tricks on me. My hunger was overwhelming. Something about their bodies was wrong. They started to eat the plants. They were smacking rather loudly. It made unnatural, fleshy sounds. Every now and then, one would pause and give off a low growl. It didn't all sound like a cat. More like a slightly higher pitched bear growl. After a while, the sounds diminished, and I felt their presence vanish. I gathered my strength and forced myself to my feet. What had just happened? What were those creatures? The violent crimes that I had heard about earlier popped into my mind. My hands began to shake slightly. What would have happened if I hadn't been paralyzed, and if they had noticed I was still alive? Most house lights were still lit. I mustn't have been out for long. Once again my body gave off a deep growl. It was as if my stomach was eating itself. I had to get some food or else I was in danger of collapsing again. Secretly, this is just the beginning of Bloodborne. Like, not the beginning of the game, but the beginning of the events that would lead to the events of Bloodborne. When the city's starting to rot. Being as desperate as I was, I approached the next best house and knocked. I was surprised when the door actually opened. Hi. Hi there. Come on in. How nice of you to visit. Do we know each other yet? Before me stood a fashionably dressed woman with a big smile on her face. At first glance, she seemed welcoming, but her movements were rather stiff and almost mechanical, as if they had been practiced over and over again. You're not part of some kind of weird, chaos cult, are you? She took another more thorough look at me, and seemed to realize that we did in fact not know each other. Yet. Ah, you must be a new neighbor then. Please come in. She disappeared before I could correct her. I hesitantly followed her inside. On my way in, I saw a food bowl near the entrance, with some of the strange-looking plants I had seen earlier in it. Huh. She'd been feeding those to her pet. Did they say some weird woman scientist was doing experiments, and you look kind of like you're maybe maybe you're the one doing them? I peeked after the woman into the living room. A man leapt to his feet as he saw me and stretched his big hand out to me. Don't touch me, anime! His other arm hung down limply. Apparently he wasn't able to move it. Hi there. It's nice to meet you. How are you doing? I reciprocated his firm handshake, and he cheerfully gestured me to take a seat beside him. To my surprise, the girl who had helped me earlier was here as well. She gave me a small wave. Hey, Ray. It's starting to feel like a festivity. We should have neighborhood get-togethers like these more often. Oh, right. This is... She turned and frowned in my direction while trying to remember a name she hadn't asked me before. Rather. Scott. I'm Scott. Right. Scott. He moved in nearby recently, I think, so I thought we should invite him in as well. Certainly. It is nice to meet you. Oh, no, I'm not really... Oh, right, food. Give me a second. The woman rushed into the kitchen and came out with steaming dishes of food. I could make out different kinds of meat, baked potatoes, and more. My stomach gave off a deep growl, and my mouth began to water. And any thought of honesty about my origin was gone. The other visitors started piling food onto their plates, and I followed suit. As I devoured it and life came back to my body, I let my eyes wander over the others. Everyone seemed to be rather intense, especially the woman and the man. Don't look at me that way. It was like they were looking at walking garbage. Their movements were rather stiff. Every now and then they threw glances each other's way. Glances that seemed to indicate mistrust. So we kinda like, dump his body out the back. Just give him these roots, man. He'll totally eat them because Manly's controlling him, and he wants to see him die. The woman seemed to especially be eyeing the cup that the man was drinking out of. Every now and then, when they noticed each other's looks, they put on a fake smile. Ha ha! The girl seemed like she hadn't planned to be here in the first place, but she just dragged into it just like I was. As I was cleaning my plate of its scraps, something important flashed into my mind. Excuse me, would you mind if I used your phone? The woman tissed. Tisk, tisk, tisk. I'm afraid I don't have one. I never cared for those buggers. She looked over to the man. Maybe he can use yours. Of course! I can show you to my house once we're ready to go. I gave off a sign of relief and thanked the man. He waved his hand in the air. No problem at all. Please excuse me for one moment, though. He shuffled out of the room, presumably toward the bathroom. Alright, I'll make some more tea. She scooped up the man's cup and left me alone with the girl. I cleared my throat and nodded in her direction. Thank you again for lending me your phone. I did appreciate that. You're welcome. I hope you will have more luck with the landline. Yeah, I hope so too. And I guess that was the end of the conversation. Perhaps she felt uncomfortable speaking to a weird-smelling stranger. I'm going to go wash my dishes. And there she went. The other two were taking quite a while. I used the opportunity and left my eyes wander around the room. The walls are dressed with paintings of all kinds. Pictures of nature, as well as more abstract drawings. A fancy-looking framed piece of paper, and a photograph that was standing on the drawer beneath them caught my eye. The former seemed to be an art degree, and the latter a picture of the man and woman when they were younger. They were standing somewhere that could be a university campus. Both had a genuine smile on their face. It seemed like their friendship went back quite a bit. Hey, why the scary music? All you do is just say hey. Whoa! Did she sneak behind me? I thought I had a clear view of the kitchen entrance. I think I heard some rumbling coming from downstairs. It'd probably be good if you check it out in case she hurt herself. Rather. I was about to say, yeah, that sounds like a bad idea. I feel like you're luring me down there, and you're just gonna lock the door behind me, and there's gonna be a monster in the basement. Because there's always a monster in the basement, or a lab or something. This goes all the way back to Goosebumps, okay? She was likely referring to the woman who had invited me in. You did? She has been gone for quite a while now. Maybe something did happen to her. Perhaps I should take a look. I felt her eyes follow me to the basement. This is such a trap. I squinted down the stairs. It was almost pitch black. I swallowed back my nerves and carefully crept down the steps. Maybe I should have called out to the woman, but something told me not to. I managed to reach the bottom stair and peeked around the corner. There I saw the woman kneeling by a lamplight, in front of a large cage. A basket of strange plants sat beside her. There. It's all right. Take a good sniff of the cup. We need to hurry, okay? I know that he's growing one too. Everyone is. Everyone wants to get rid of the competition. We need to hurry. She held the man's cup to the bars. Something in her voice disturbed me. Whatever was going on, I wanted no part of it. I returned to the living room, as quietly as I could. There you are, all ready to go. Upon hearing the man's loud voice, I jumped a bit. What I had seen in the basement made me a bit anxious. I took a quick look around and saw the girl was already gone. Sure, I'm ready. Leaving already? I just made some more tea, I'm not drinking that. I turned to see the woman standing in the living room entrance with a put-on smile. Sorry, dear. I'm just not young enough to stay out like late that we used to. She put on a playful pout. Oh, you do wound me. Come by again. You know you're welcome anytime. We bid our farewells and set out into the cold night. I was glad to leave. What I had seen was still nagging on my mind. The man might be in danger. I had to tell him. I hesitated. How was I supposed to tell him when I myself wasn't sure what I had seen? But I collected myself and went for it. To my surprise, he wasn't nearly as upset as the woman as I thought he would be. He actually seemed to be more upset at me. I think you should not have snooped around in someone's house who invited you over. It's true, though. I was left perplexed. What just happened? I thought I was warning him, but instead I've been scolded like a child. His face relaxed and gave me his usual smile. It seemed slightly pained this time. I'm going to kill you now. I suppose there's been no harm done. Perhaps he just didn't believe me. I couldn't blame him. I noticed more and more vacant houses as we crept through the town. Some were boarded up. Doors had been left wide open. Why are there so many empty houses here? Oh, you know, economy. These houses have been vacant for a while now. You need not worry. Or maybe some kind of weird experimental town. I was sure that I had passed by here earlier, but I didn't notice any abandoned buildings back then. They couldn't have left so suddenly in just half a day, could they? An uneasy feeling started to fester inside of me. Here we are. We stopped before a house that looked much like every other house in the town. He stepped inside. I hesitated at the entrance before trailing behind him. Come on in. No need to be shy. Do you want something to drink? No thanks. Yeah, no, I'm not drinking anything in this town. The man hesitantly grunted and led me down the hallway. Maybe if you offer me a Dr. Pepper, I'll drink it. Okay. Not saying this video is sponsored by Dr. Pepper, but I'm just saying, no way Dr. Pepper would ever betray you. It's always your friend. I mean, it's a doctor. I only wanted to use the phone and get out. All the weirdness of the day had me on edge. You know what else puts me on edge? A nice cold Dr. Pepper. What if I still couldn't reach anyone? Where would I go? I was balancing a fine line between hope and despair, and the phone call would probably be what would topple me in either direction. Alright, here you are. The phone was one of those old-fashioned ones that had a cord attached to the receiver. At least it had buttons instead of a rotary dial. It's not that old-fashioned. They still make those. I picked up the receiver and tried a number. Am I doing something wrong? There's no dial tone. Huh. Let me see. Stabs you. He took the receiver from my hand and pressed a few buttons. He let out a disappointed sigh. Not again. Those damn rodents keep getting in my cables. I'll go take a look at. Feel free to make yourself at home. In case you get thirsty. He fetched a small bottle of soda from the kitchen, gave it to me, and went into the basement. It seemed like I wouldn't be able to leave quite so soon. Once I held a drink in my hand, I did start to get thirsty. I took a sip and thought about what to do next. Save the game, that's what. Stay here and wait. I didn't think he would be happy with me poking around considering how he felt after I told him about what I saw in the woman's house. Not wanting to test his kindness, I waited. Alright, it's all done. I jumped. Sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. No, it's fine. That went faster than I had expected. Good thing I decided against snooping around. The phone should be working now. Feel free to give it a try. I'll give you some space. Call me when you're done. He took the ball I had drunk from earlier and left through the hallway. I had an odd sense of deja vu. I know I've been here before. I shook it off and started dialing some numbers. They were the same I had already tried on the girl's mobile phone. Once again, they failed to connect. How could that be? I was 100% certain that the numbers were correct. I tried all the numbers of friends, family, and even work colleagues I could think of, until finally... Yes, hello? It was a woman's voice that I didn't recognize. I was certain that I had dialed the number of one of my work colleagues. Excuse me, isn't this Tom's telephone number? I don't know who that is. Are you another scam caller? Don't call me again. She hung up. Alright. Something was definitely wrong here. It might be best to talk to the man and see if he can help me somehow. So I'm gonna make another save. I'm gonna go back to the other decision here. Check the pictures. I took a look at the pictures hanging in the hall. There weren't too many, but he seemed to be pretty cheerful in all of them, especially the ones with his dog. For some reason, I hadn't seen it around. Nothing else caught my eye. Living room. There was only one room over. Surely he wouldn't mind. He said I should feel at home after all. Snooping as usual, I see. The living room was minimalistic and unimpressive. A TV stood in the corner, gathering dust. His bookshelf was well maintained on the other hand. I looked over the books. He seemed pretty interested in biology. Maybe he was a teacher, or even a researcher, just like myself. I'm a bit of a scientist myself, you know. I'd love to chat with him about his field sometime, rather, once I get out of this mess. I chose a random book and opened it. I quickly shut it to recheck the title. It seemed like I had pulled out a fantasy book instead of a biology text. Evolutionary Development, a practical study guide. That would be a rather weird name for a fantasy novel, but the depictions on the pages confirmed it being fiction. Nope. The pages showed drawings of creatures I'd never seen before, accompanied by detailed graphs and diagrams. I guess it could be one of those fake science art pieces like what the Voynich manuscript is theorized to be. Yeah, something like that. I returned the book and went back out into the hall. Alright, it's all done. I jumped. Let's load again. Check the study. I entered the man's study, felt like I was crossing a line. After all, he invited me into his home and was trying to help me. But my curiosity overwhelmed me. I wonder what that thing in the women's basement was, and maybe I can find answers here. I took a look at the table to see what he was working on. A flipped over picture frame and an open journal grabbed my attention. I decided to take a sneak peek at the picture and was surprised to find a photograph of the woman and the man. It looked older than the picture that I had seen at the woman's place, but they still seemed to be good friends in this one. It depicted them in a park, as they were having a picnic. A canvas was set up nearby. Why was it lying around face down? Perhaps he just hadn't had the time to hang it up yet. I turned my attention to the journal. His writing was messy, but I would probably be able to decipher it with some effort, which I do. There's another branch here. Read. I shouldn't just take someone's journal like that. Reading it was bad enough, but it was the lesser evil. I have a feeling that most of the others have found out what the plants can be used for. They must be developing their own pets in secret. Digimon! Figures it wouldn't go so smoothly. I'll have to grow my own and hope that I'm faster than they are. I should be good, as long as I avoid leaving everything of mine at someone's place. They can only go after me if they have my scent. It's too bad they die after just one use. I set the journal back down. So this has become some kind of weird Pokemon war? This is like the start of the Pokemon era. Now that I knew he was a fantasy writer, that's the only way I could explain what this was about. Didn't she get used to his cup, though? With, like, in the basement? So then the thing has his scent, right? Especially the terrifying sketches that accompany the text were something straight out of horror fiction. With doubts gnawing at my mind, I made my way back to the telephone. And another option. Take it. Normally I wouldn't steal, but it's going to be further from a normal situation. I had no idea when he'd come back, and how much time I had to read it. As I picked up the book, something fell out of it. I was startled by the sound and froze. Slowly I picked it up, and curiously took a look at it. It was a small key, possibly for a mailbox or a drawer. While wondering about where the key could fit, I suddenly heard steps that were coming closer and closer. My heartbeat accelerated, and in a panic I hastily put the key and the notebook into my pocket, while quickly exiting the room. Okay, so basically we're at the same branching area now. We'll skip ahead. Okay, here we are. And I will save here. See if these choices are important. Maybe I had to clue is how I could get back home. I'm assuming the study one is important, because we got a key that's completely unique. The other ones just gave you information. I crept down the hall. You went this way, right? I began to hear some murmuring. A steady chill ran down my back. The sound was coming from the basement. The old floorboards squealed beneath my toes. I saw flickers of a weak light coming from down the steps. I took them as gently as I could as I held a hand over my mouth to quiet my breath. I reached the bomb and turned a corner. It was just like before. The man knelt before a big cage, a small lamp next to him, and held something up to the bars. He hissed to whatever was inside. Yes, you have the scent now, don't you? We must take care of this one tonight. He's curious. He will find the secret much faster than the others. No, we can't have him making something like you too. Its killer be killed in this town. My stomach dropped out from underneath me as I heard the horrible scraping from inside the cage. I took a step back, bumping into a wall. Before I could react, I'd accidentally switched on the main light. Whoops! A sudden flood of white blinded me for a moment. Once my eyes adjusted, the first thing I saw was it. The man was screaming at me, but I could barely think about him. I couldn't look away from that creature. It was cowering inside a dirty cage that seemed to be too small for it. It had the features of a human, but I could also see some elements that were distinctly dog-like. Its mouth was way too big, and the inside of it was filled with seemingly random set teeth, or at least something that resembled teeth. Worst of all, though, were the enormous eyes staring back at me. The man fumbled the lock in the cage. My feet finally began to move. I ran out of the house and into the streets. All the while, one thought was frantically running through my head. I had to get out. I had to get away from this demented town. With this thought clouding my mind, I hadn't realized that I had exited town already, and was now on a big grassy plain. Breathing heavily and with fear flooding my mind, I'd almost not noticed how heavy my legs had become. Soon I was struggling to stay on my feet, and my vision slowly darkened from exhaustion and panic. I wanted to look back to see how close the monster was, but I was too afraid of seeing it right behind me. I gathered my courage, and quickly glanced behind me and, to my surprise, the thing wasn't following me. I didn't know if it had ever been following me in the first place, but it seemed like the man wanted to send after me. To kill me. Realizing that I was safer now, I stopped. My legs were numb, and almost gave in, but I managed to keep standing. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. It couldn't be real. There was no way to explain what I had seen. Whoops, go back. And every inch of my body repulsed the idea of such a monster existing. But I had seen it with my own 2 eyes. I needed to rest, but stopping could have been risky. Save? Take a break! I should really take a quick break and make sure that I wouldn't collapse along the way. So I sat down for a bit, and kept lookout for the monster. After catching my breath, I suddenly remembered the journal. Maybe this would be a good time to take another peek inside. Read it. From the beginning again to read. I discovered the cause of the disappearance of the pets. No one was stealing them or killing them. They just changed. I installed a GPS chip on my own dog, and followed it around to see what was going on, just to discover it eating one of those odd-looking plants. I tried to stop it, but it growled at me. Never had I seen it act that way before. There was nothing I could do but let it finish. I took one of those plants with me to study it. After just a day, I saw that my dog had changed. It was a bit bigger and its hair was falling out in great quantities. It also started to bark at me, seemingly for no reason. I tried to build the plant myself, hoping to see why I was so drawn to it, but I found the taste nearly unbearable. I set the journal down. I thought I just heard a sound. I checked my head around me to find a source. There was nothing. Maybe it was just my imagination, or maybe it was time to keep moving. Continue reading. Yes. I woke the next day to piercing pain in my right arm. At first, I was horrified to find that it was entirely bent out of shape. But something inside me suppressed my fear. I calmly stood to fix it. At first, I thought about getting rid of it, but the pain had already subsided. I was able to flatten it by beating with a hammer. Well, I lost all feeling in the limb by that point. What would people think if I went out with a bent arm? I began to look for my dog. The first thing I found were large animal footprints, much too large for its paws. The kitchen had been torn apart, and strange hair littered the whole house. Then I found it, or at least something that was once my dog. I could still see the resemblance, but most of its hair had fallen out, and its jaw was dislocated. It began to growl as soon as it saw me. Shortly after, it jumped on me with no provocation. It was hard to keep off with just one hand, but its teeth had fallen out, making it nearly harmless. I managed to knock it out and lock it up in the basement. Now I had definitely heard something. I felt really uneasy about this, but didn't want to stop reading. I felt so close to figuring out something crucial. Yes. A little more couldn't hurt. I couldn't see any sign of the monster anywhere. I should be fine. That's what a predator does. It doesn't want you to see it. I should be fine. Alright, where was I? I froze up. There was definitely something near me. And it was close. Maybe it was the anime girl. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Way too close. I could almost feel its ragged breath on my skin. My heart was starting to race. My chest contracted to the point where I had difficulties breathing. I start. Take a break. Read it. Continue. No. It was way too risky. I should keep moving. Hell knows what that monster would do to me if it found me. I continued on at a slower pace this time, and soon came to a small but quickly flowing river. It wasn't a good night to get my clothes wet, but it looked small enough for me to jump over with a running start. But as I left the gap, something fell from my pocket into the water. It was the man's journal. It was too late to retrieve it. It was so quickly being carried away. For a split second I considered going after it, but decided against it. It was nothing but the scribbles of a madman anyway. I doubt it could have much been used for me. At least that's what I had hoped. But I needed to carry on. I needed to find a way back home. After walking for what felt like hours, I caught a glimpse of a town. It looked quite a bit bigger than the one I had just left. The concrete buildings looked like needles from a distance. I wasn't fully sure what I felt at that moment. Part of me was relieved about seeing some civilization and being able to look for help. Another part of me was still in shock over what I had just experienced, but I was too tired to try and make sense of it. And so I pushed myself onward, using the remaining strength I had left. Soon it's going to be over, was what I naively kept mumbling to myself as I dragged myself closer towards the next nightmare. Is that the end of the demo? You found key 1. Hi, Game Director here. Thank you for trying out the demo. This game has been in development for way longer than one would think, and I want to share it with you. If you're a horror manga nerd, I haven't heard about it, I heard you enjoyed it. Hope you picked up on the dynamic audio implementation as well. As someone who's mainly been a composer and sound designer for visual novels, I made sure to use my expertise in the area to make this game's audio a bit more special. I even noticed a change in the title screen theme, that you'd finish the first act, wink wink. If you'd like to help us make Mycorrhiza the best it can be, then please consider sharing your opinion of us, click the text, surf your browser. If you'd like to be kept up on the date's game progress, see exclusive teasers, kill us, check out our Twitter. And while we're on the topic of Twitters, recommend checking out Horror Manga Rec Twitter account. Now the first door has finally been opened. I'll work hard to make sure the second one will be open as soon as possible. Links in the credits. Doesn't really apply for a video. That's a nice touch. I like that. Deepest lore. I wonder if it's a case where, like, the key is just, oh, it gets to the next ending, or rather the next chapter. Let's load some other decisions here real quick. Okay, so I checked the other choices, so that there's basically only one ending. And the journal and the key thing is just, it basically affects whether or not you get to read it and get more lore at that part of the game. The key I don't know what it's for yet. I'm assuming that's more designed for, like, the full game. So yeah, anyway, that's it for the Mycorrhiza demo. It's a solid enough start. I'm curious if they're using, I believe the character art. So the monster art is one artist. The character art, I believe, is like a free use kind of visual novel asset. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I'm thinking. So I'm wondering if they're going to use that for the full game or if that's just a temporary thing. Because I would recommend that they actually switch that art out. Because it does contrast a little bit with the atmosphere and the other art for the monster and everything. I wouldn't go too grimdark, like too realistic and grimdark for the character art. I would actually leave a little bit of normalcy or cuteness to it. So it does have some contrast. Because you can do the thing where it's like Junji Ito style monster, then Junji style Ito characters. I wouldn't really do that, because I feel like that's been done quite a bit. I would like a slight contrast gap, but not as cutesy as they are now. Aside from that, the writing is solid enough. We're very early into the story, so I'm not going to comment on necessarily the scare factor or stuff like that. The monster is creepy, and the premise can be creepy. But storyline-wise, we're pretty much in the atmosphere's setup phase. So horror writing criticisms I would leave for basically a full version of the game. I would also say you need at least 1 or 2 bad end CGs. And you maybe need some neutral CGs within your chapters. So in your visual novel scripting format, you've got the punch CG, which is the dog rat looking monster thing. But then you need some earlier kind of gut punch CGs. So you need like maybe a bad end one or something. Doesn't have to be like gory, but maybe just something like, it can even be something like kind of artistically vague, like a silhouette of something that's bad happening. And I think you need sometimes you need setting CGs. Stuff like that. So, once again, it's a solid horror visual novel. It does need its final embellishments whenever a full version is released. Because, once again, you don't want your main hook CG, kind of a hook thing, to just be one act. But yeah. Anyway, so, thank you all for watching me play the Mycorrhiza demo. I'll see you guys later. And take it easy.